Julian Vance stopped his onyx Rolls-Royce in the middle of the empty street, his heart pounding as he stared at the figure lying motionless on the park bench. Snow was falling heavily, covering the small body like a white blanket, but he could see the familiar dark hair peeking out from under the thin jacket. It was Maya, his housekeeper, the woman he had fired just 3 days ago, without even giving her a chance to explain. Julian jumped out of his car, his expensive leather shoes slipping on the icy sidewalk as he ran toward the bench. Maya's lips were blue. Her skin was pale as paper and she wasn't moving. Snow had piled up on her arms and legs, and her breathing was so shallow he could barely see her chest rising and falling. "Maya," he shouted, shaking her gently. "Maya, wake up." But she didn't respond. Her body was cold as ice, and Julian realized with horror that she might be dying right there in front of him. With trembling hands, he pulled out his phone and called 911. "I need an ambulance immediately," he yelled into the phone. "There's a woman who's unconscious in the snow. She's freezing to death." As Julian waited for help to arrive, holding Maya's frozen hand in his, he couldn't stop thinking about the terrible mistake he had made. He had destroyed an innocent woman's life, and now she might die because of his cruelty. But what Julian didn't know was that this moment would reveal secrets about Maya's life that would shock him to his core. Secrets that would make him question everything he thought he knew about the quiet woman who had cleaned his house for 3 years, and secrets that would change both of their lives forever. 3 days earlier, Julian Vance sat behind his massive mahogany desk in his penthouse office, looking out at the city below. At 38 years old, Julian Vance, a formidable black man with a reputation as sharp as his tailored suits, was worth over $4 billion and owned hotels, restaurants, and office buildings all over the world. People called him brilliant, ruthless, and unstoppable. But they also called him cold. Julian had built his empire by making quick decisions and never looking back. He didn't have time for emotions or personal relationships. He had employees, not friends, and he liked it that way. His assistant, David, knocked on his office door and entered with a concerned expression. "Mr. Vance," David said carefully, "there's been an incident at your penthouse." Julian looked up from his computer. "What kind of incident?" "It involves Maya, your housekeeper. Mrs. Gable from the security desk says Maya was found sleeping in the building's laundry room last night." Julian frowned. "Sleeping in the laundry room? That's ridiculous. She has her own apartment." David shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, Mrs. Gable says this isn't the first time. She's seen Maya sleeping there several nights this week." Julian felt a flash of anger. "So my housekeeper is using my building like a homeless shelter? This is completely unacceptable." "Sir, maybe we should ask Maya why." "No," Julian interrupted sharply. "I don't care why. This is a luxury building, David. My neighbors pay millions of dollars to live here. They don't want to see staff members sleeping in common areas." David looked worried. "But sir, Maya has been working for you for 3 years. She's always been reliable and hardworking. Maybe there's an explanation." "I said no," Julian said coldly. "Call security and have Maya removed from the building immediately. And fire her. I want her gone today." David stared at his boss in shock. "Mr. Vance, are you sure? Without even talking to her first?" Julian was already turning back to his computer. "I'm sure. Handle it." As David left the office looking troubled, Julian pushed all thoughts of Maya out of his mind. He had more important things to worry about than the personal problems of his staff. But if Julian had bothered to ask about Maya's situation, he would have learned some heartbreaking truths. 26-year-old Maya Evans had been cleaning Julian Vance's penthouse for 3 years, and in all that time, she had never spoken more than a few words to her billionaire boss. He was always rushing off to meetings or talking on his phone, treating her like she was invisible. Maya didn't mind being invisible. She preferred it that way. It meant she could work quietly, and earn the money she desperately needed to take care of her sick mother. For the past 2 years, Maya's mother, Eleanor, had been battling cancer. The medical bills were enormous, and Maya's salary as a housekeeper barely covered the costs of treatment, medication, and doctor visits. Maya had been forced to give up her small apartment 6 months ago because she couldn't afford the rent. She had been too embarrassed to tell anyone about her situation. Instead, she had been sleeping in different places, sometimes on a friend's couch, sometimes in her car, and recently in the laundry room of Julian's building. Maya thought no one would notice. The laundry room was in the basement, and she was always gone before anyone came down to do their washing. She brought a small pillow and a thin blanket, and she tried to be as quiet as possible. But Mrs. Gable, the night security guard, had seen her. On the morning that changed everything, Maya was getting ready to start her workday when Mrs. Gable approached her. "Maya, honey," Mrs. Gable said gently, "I need to talk to you about something." Maya felt her stomach drop. "What about Mrs. Gable?" "Sweetheart, I know you've been sleeping in the laundry room. I've seen you coming and going for the past week." Maya's face turned red with embarrassment. "Mrs. Gable, I'm so sorry. I didn't think anyone would notice. I'll find somewhere else to—" "Maya, why are you sleeping here? What happened to your apartment?" Maya's eyes filled with tears. I had to give it up. My mother is sick, and the medical bills, I can't afford rent and her treatment. But I didn't want to lose my job, so I thought if I could just sleep here quietly until I figured something out." Mrs. Gable's heart broke for the young woman. "Oh, honey, why didn't you talk to Mr. Vance? Maybe he could help." "No," Maya said quickly. "Please don't tell him. He doesn't care about his staff's personal problems. He barely even looks at me when I'm cleaning his house. If he finds out I'm homeless, he'll fire me for sure." Mrs. Gable looked conflicted. "Maya, I have to report this to building management. It's against the rules for anyone to sleep in the common areas." "Please," Maya begged, tears streaming down her face. "Just give me a few more days. I'm trying to find another place to stay. Please don't take away the only safe place I have." But Mrs. Gable had to follow the rules. An hour later, she made the call that would change Maya's life forever. Maya was in the middle of cleaning Julian's kitchen when David arrived at the penthouse. She looked up in surprise. David rarely came to the apartment during her work hours. "Maya," David said uncomfortably, "I need to speak with you." Maya immediately felt worried. "Is something wrong? Did I break something?" David looked like he was in pain. "Maya, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but Mr. Vance has decided to terminate your employment." Maya felt like the world had stopped spinning. "What? Why? What did I do wrong?" "It's about the sleeping situation in the laundry room," David said quietly. Maya's face went white. "I can explain." "I'm sorry, Maya. The decision has been made. You need to collect your things and leave immediately." Maya stared at David in shock. "Can I please talk to Mr. Vance? Can I explain what's happening?" David shook his head sadly. "He doesn't want to discuss it. I'm sorry, Maya. I really am." Maya felt like she was going to be sick. "David, please. I need this job. My mother is dying and I need the money for her treatment. If I lose this job, I don't know what I'll do." David's heart was breaking, but he had his orders. "I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do." Maya gathered her few belongings with tears streaming down her face. As she walked toward the door of the penthouse she had cleaned for 3 years, she turned back to David. "Can you please tell Mr. Vance something for me?" she asked quietly. "What?" "Tell him that I'm sorry I disappointed him, and tell him that working for him was the best job I ever had, even if he never noticed I existed." After Maya left, David stood in the empty penthouse, feeling sick to his stomach. He had never seen his boss make such a cruel decision before. But when he tried to call Julian to tell him about Maya's mother and her situation, Julian refused to take the call. "It's done, David," Julian had said coldly. "I don't want to hear about it." After being fired, Maya's life fell apart completely. With no job and no money, she couldn't afford to stay even in the cheapest motels. She spent the first night sleeping in her old car, but it broke down the next day, and she couldn't afford to fix it. Maya tried desperately to find another job, but every place she applied wanted references, and she was too afraid to ask Julian Vance for one. She also couldn't explain the gap in her work history without telling people she had been fired. Meanwhile, her mother's condition was getting worse. Eleanor needed expensive medication every day, and without Maya's income, they couldn't afford it. Maya watched helplessly as her mother grew weaker and sicker. On the second night, Maya slept on a bench at the bus station. Security guards woke her up at 3 a.m. and told her she had to leave. She wandered the cold streets until morning, looking for somewhere safe to rest. By the third day, Maya was exhausted, hungry, and hopeless. She had been walking around the city for hours, looking for work or shelter. When the snow started falling, Maya found herself in Central Park, where she and her mother used to walk when Maya was a little girl. She sat down on a bench, planning to rest for just a few minutes before continuing her search for help. But Maya was more tired than she realized. The cold, the stress, and the lack of food and sleep had weakened her body. As the snow fell harder and the temperature dropped, Maya's exhaustion overwhelmed her. She curled up on the bench, using her thin jacket as a blanket, and closed her eyes. She told herself she would just rest for an hour, and then keep looking for work. But Maya didn't wake up in an hour. The cold seeped into her body, and hypothermia began to set in. Her breathing became shallow, her heart rate slowed down, and her body temperature dropped dangerously low. Maya was dying, and she didn't even know it. Meanwhile, Julian Vance was having the worst morning of his life, though he didn't understand why. He had woken up early to go to an important business meeting across town. As his driver took him through Central Park, Julian found himself thinking about Maya for the first time since he had fired her. He tried to push the thoughts away, but something was bothering him. David had seemed really upset about firing Maya, and Mrs. Gable had called his office 3 times, trying to speak with him about Maya's situation. Julian had refused to take the calls. He didn't want to hear excuses or sob stories. Business was business. But as his car drove through the snowy park, Julian couldn't stop thinking about the last time he had actually looked at Maya, really looked at her. When was it? He tried to remember, but he realized with shock that he had barely paid attention to her in 3 years. He remembered her as quiet, efficient, and invisible. She always finished her work quickly and left without bothering him. She never asked for raises or time off or special favors like his previous housekeepers had. Now that he thought about it, Maya had been the perfect employee. So why was he feeling so guilty about firing her? Julian was lost in these uncomfortable thoughts when his driver suddenly slammed on the brakes. "Sorry, Mr. Vance," the driver said. "There's someone on that bench up ahead. Looks like they might need help." Julian looked up and saw a figure covered in snow lying on a park bench. His first instinct was to tell his driver to keep going. He didn't have time to deal with homeless people, but something about the figure looked familiar. "Stop the car," Julian said suddenly. "Sir?" "Stop the car. Now." Julian got out and walked toward the bench, his heart pounding with a terrible feeling of dread. As he got closer, he could see dark hair peeking out from under the snow. And that's when he realized the truth that would haunt him forever. The woman dying on the bench was Maya. His Maya. The housekeeper he had fired 3 days ago for sleeping in his building's laundry room. The woman he had destroyed was now dying in the snow, and it was all his fault. 911, what's your emergency?" I need an ambulance in Central Park immediately, Julian shouted into his phone, his voice shaking with panic. There's a woman who's unconscious. She's been sleeping outside in the snow and she's not responding. Sir, can you tell me the exact location? Julian looked around frantically. We're near the pond about 50 yards from the East Drive entrance. Please hurry. Sir, is the woman breathing? Julian leaned down and put his ear near Maya's mouth. Her breathing was so shallow he could barely detect it. Barely. Her lips are blue and her skin is ice cold. Sir, I need you to try to warm her up without moving her too much. Do you have any blankets or coats? Julian immediately took off his expensive cashmere coat and carefully wrapped it around Maya's small body. Then he sat down on the bench and gently pulled her against his chest, trying to share his body heat with her. Maya, he whispered, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry. Please don't die. Please. For the first time in 3 years, Julian really looked at Maya's face. She was younger than he had realized, probably in her mid-20s. She had long eyelashes and soft features, and even unconscious and nearly frozen, there was something beautiful and peaceful about her. How had he never noticed how pretty she was? How had he worked with her for 3 years, and never really seen her as a human being? The ambulance is on its way, sir. Can you tell me the woman's name? Maya, Julian said, his voice choking with emotion. Her name is Maya Evans. She used to work for me. As Julian held Maya's freezing body, waiting for the ambulance, he found himself praying for the first time since he was a child. Please don't let her die, he whispered. Please let her be okay. I'll do anything. I'll make this right somehow. When the paramedics arrived, they immediately began working on Maya. They checked her vital signs, wrapped her in heated blankets, and started an IV to warm her blood. What's her relationship to you? One of the paramedics asked, as they loaded Maya into the ambulance. She's... Julian paused. What was Maya to him? An employee? A stranger? She's someone I failed, he said quietly. Someone I should have protected. Are you coming with us to the hospital? The paramedic asked. Julian didn't hesitate. Yes. As the ambulance raced through the snowy streets, Julian held Maya's hand and watched the medical team work to save her life. The paramedics were talking in medical terms he didn't understand, but he could tell from their faces that Maya's condition was serious. Is she going to be okay? Julian asked. She has severe hypothermia, one paramedic explained. Her body temperature is dangerously low. We won't know the extent of the damage until we get her to the hospital. Julian felt like he was going to be sick. This was all his fault. If he had just listened to David, if he had just asked Maya why she was sleeping in the laundry room, if he had shown even the smallest amount of human compassion, none of this would have happened. The emergency room at Mount Sinai Hospital was chaos when the ambulance arrived. Doctors and nurses rushed to take Maya from the paramedics and wheel her into a treatment room. Julian tried to follow, but a nurse stopped him. Sir, you'll need to wait here. Are you family? Julian struggled with how to answer. I'm her employer, or I was. It's complicated. The nurse looked at him strangely. We'll need to contact her emergency contact. Do you have that information? Julian realized with horror that he didn't know anything about Maya's family or personal life. He had employed her for 3 years and never bothered to learn even the most basic facts about her. I don't know, he admitted, feeling ashamed. For the next 2 hours, Julian sat in the waiting room, watching the clock and praying that Maya would survive. He called David and told him to cancel all his meetings for the day. He didn't care about business right now. All he cared about was making sure Maya was okay. Finally, a doctor came out to speak with him. Are you here about Maya Evans? The doctor asked. Yes, Julian said, jumping up from his chair. "How is she?" "She's stable, but her condition is serious. She had severe hypothermia and was very close to organ failure. A few more hours in that cold, and she would have died." Julian felt like he had been punched in the stomach. "But she's going to be okay?" "We think so, but it will take time. Her body needs to warm up slowly, and we need to monitor her for complications. She'll be in the hospital for at least a week." "Can I see her?" Julian asked. The doctor looked surprised. "Are you family?" "No, but I'm the reason she was out there. This is my fault." The doctor studied Julian's face and seemed to see the genuine guilt and concern there. "She's sleeping now, but you can see her for a few minutes. Room 314. Julian walked slowly to Maya's room, his heart heavy with guilt and regret. When he opened the door, he saw Maya lying in the hospital bed, looking tiny and fragile under all the blankets and machines. Her face had color again, and her breathing was steady. But she looked so young and vulnerable that Julian felt tears in his eyes. He sat down in the chair beside her bed and took her hand gently. "Maya," he whispered, "I'm so sorry. I should have listened. I should have cared. I should have been better." Just then, Maya's eyes fluttered open. She looked around the room in confusion, then focused on Julian's face. "Mr. Vance," she said weakly. "What? Where am I?" "You're in the hospital," Julian said gently. "You were unconscious in the park. The doctors say you almost died from hypothermia." Maya tried to sit up, but she was too weak. "I'm sorry," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. Please don't be angry with me." Julian felt his heart break completely. Even after everything that had happened, Maya was still apologizing to him. "Maya," he said, his voice shaking with emotion, "you have nothing to apologize for. I'm the one who should be sorry. I fired you without even asking why you were sleeping in the laundry room. I should have tried to help you instead of throwing you out on the street." Maya looked at him in surprise. She had never heard Julian speak with such emotion before. "Mr. Vance, it's okay. You had every right to fire me. I broke the rules." "No," Julian interrupted. "It's not okay. Nothing about this is okay. Maya, can you tell me why you were sleeping in the laundry room? What happened to your apartment?" Maya looked embarrassed, but something in Julian's eyes made her feel like she could trust him. "My mother has cancer," she said quietly. "The medical bills are so expensive that I had to choose between paying rent and paying for her treatment. I gave up my apartment 6 months ago." Julian stared at her in shock. "6 months ago? You've been homeless for 6 months?" Maya nodded. "I've been staying with friends sometimes, or sleeping in my car, but my car broke down, and I didn't have anywhere else to go. The laundry room felt safe." "Why didn't you tell me?" Julian asked. "Why didn't you ask for help?" Maya looked at him like he had asked a ridiculous question. "Mr. Vance, in 3 years, you never once asked me how I was doing or if I needed anything. You barely even looked at me when I was working. I didn't think you would care about my problems." Her words hit Julian like a slap in the face, because she was absolutely right. He had treated Maya like she was invisible, like she wasn't even human. "You're right," he said quietly. "I should have cared. I should have seen that you were struggling." Maya looked confused by his admission. "Mr. Vance, are you feeling okay? You've never talked to me like this before." Julian realized that Maya was right. He had never had a real conversation with her in 3 years. He had been so focused on his business empire that he had forgotten how to be human. But before he could respond, a nurse came into the room with a worried expression. "Ms. Evans," the nurse said, "we need to talk to you about your insurance situation. There seems to be a problem with your coverage." Maya's face went white. "What kind of problem?" "Your insurance policy has been canceled. Without coverage, you'll be responsible for paying for this hospitalization out of pocket. The bill could be quite substantial. Julian watched as Maya's face crumpled with despair. She had nearly died, and now she was facing medical bills that would destroy her financially. That's when Julian made a decision that would change everything. "Excuse me, nurse," he said, standing up. "I'll be covering all of Miss Evans's medical expenses. Send the bills to me." Both Maya and the nurse stared at him in shock. "Mr. Vance," Maya whispered, "you can't do that. I can't accept that much help from you." Julian looked at Maya with an expression she had never seen before. Gentle, caring, and determined. "Maya," he said softly, "it's the least I can do. But actually, I want to do much more than that." He sat back down and took her hand again. "When you get out of this hospital, you're not going back to sleeping on park benches or in laundry rooms. You're going to come home with me." Maya's eyes went wide. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I have a guest wing in my penthouse that no one ever uses. You and your mother can stay there for as long as you need. No rent, no questions asked. And I want to offer you your job back with a substantial raise." Maya started crying. "Mr. Vance, I don't understand. Why are you being so kind to me? Yesterday you fired me without even listening to my explanation." Julian felt ashamed all over again. "Because yesterday I was a selfish, heartless man who only cared about money and rules. But seeing you nearly die because of my actions, it changed something in me, Maya. It made me realize that I've been living my life all wrong." He squeezed her hand gently. "You almost died because I was too arrogant and cold to show basic human compassion. I can't change what I did, but I can try to make it right." Maya looked at him through her tears. "Mr. Vance, you don't owe me anything. What happened wasn't really your fault." "Yes, it was," Julian said firmly, "and I'm going to spend however long it takes making it up to you." Just then, a commotion in the hallway caught their attention. Through the window, they could see news reporters and camera crews gathering outside the hospital. The nurse came back into the room looking flustered. "Ms. Evans, there are reporters here asking about your story. Someone leaked information about what happened, and it's all over the news." Julian felt his stomach drop. If the media found out that he had fired Maya and she had almost died as a result, it would be a public relations nightmare for his company. But more importantly, he realized that this wasn't just about him anymore. Maya's story was about to become public, and he had no idea how that would affect her recovery or her family. "Maya," he said urgently, "we need to get you out of here before this gets worse." But as he spoke, they could hear reporters shouting questions in the hallway. "Is it true that billionaire Julian Vance fired his housekeeper for being homeless? Did Maya Evans almost die because her boss threw her out on the street? Where is Julian Vance now? Will he take responsibility for what happened?" Maya looked terrified. "Mr. Vance, what's happening? Why are they talking about you?" But before Julian could answer, the door to Maya's room burst open and everything changed again. A young female reporter with a camera crew pushed into Maya's hospital room, shoving a microphone toward Julian's face. "Mr. Vance," the reporter shouted, "is it true that you fired Maya Evans for being homeless? Do you have anything to say about the fact that she almost died because of your actions?" Maya looked terrified as bright camera lights flooded her hospital room. She tried to hide under her blankets, but the reporters kept pushing forward, firing questions at both her and Julian. "Maya, how does it feel to know that your billionaire boss left you to die on the street?" another reporter yelled. "Mr. Vance, will you be taking legal responsibility for Maya's medical bills?" Julian felt rage building inside him. These people were terrorizing Maya when she was supposed to be recovering from nearly dying. "Get out!" Julian roared, standing up and blocking the cameras from Maya's bed. "She's a patient in a hospital. You have no right to be here." But the reporters didn't leave. Instead, more of them crowded into the room, all shouting questions and pointing cameras. That's when hospital security finally arrived and began escorting the reporters out. But the damage was done. Maya was crying and shaking, and Julian could see that the stress was making her condition worse. "Maya," Julian said gently, sitting back down beside her bed. "I'm so sorry. I should have protected you from this." A doctor rushed into the room looking angry. "What happened here? This patient needs rest and quiet." "Media," Julian explained. "They forced their way in. Is Maya going to be okay?" The doctor checked Maya's vital signs and frowned. "Her heart rate is elevated and her blood pressure is high. This kind of stress could be dangerous for someone recovering from hypothermia." Julian made a decision. "Doctor, I want Maya moved to a private room immediately, the most secure one you have, and I want private security guards posted outside her door 24/7. "Mr. Vance," Maya whispered weakly, "you don't have to do that. This isn't your problem anymore." Julian looked at her with an expression of fierce determination. "Maya, you became my responsibility the moment I hired you 3 years ago. I failed you then, but I won't fail you again." While Maya rested in her new private room, Julian stepped outside to face the growing crowd of reporters gathered in the hospital lobby. His publicist, Sarah, was already there trying to control the situation. "Mr. Vance," Sarah said urgently, "this story is everywhere. Social media is exploding with outrage. People are calling you heartless and cruel. We need to do damage control immediately." Julian looked at the crowd of reporters and cameras waiting for him. For a moment, he considered having his lawyers handle everything quietly. He could pay Maya's medical bills, set up a trust fund for her mother, and make the whole story disappear. But then he thought about Maya's face when the reporters had burst into her room. He thought about how she had apologized to him even after he had destroyed her life. He thought about how she had worked for him for 3 years, never asking for anything, just trying to take care of her dying mother. "Sarah," Julian said quietly, "cancel the damage control. I'm going to tell the truth." Sarah looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Sir, if you admit fault publicly, you could face lawsuits, protests, boycotts of your businesses." "I don't care," Julian interrupted. "I did something terrible to an innocent person. It's time I took responsibility for it." Julian walked towards the crowd of reporters, and immediately the shouting began. "Mr. Vance, why did you fire Maya Evans? Did you know she was homeless when you threw her out? Are you going to pay for her medical treatment?" Julian raised his hand for silence. The lobby grew quiet as everyone waited to hear what he would say. "My name is Julian Vance," he began, his voice steady but full of emotion, "and I want to tell you about the worst mistake I've ever made." The reporters leaned forward, sensing that this was going to be bigger than they had expected. 3 days ago, I fired a young woman named Maya Evans. Maya had been my housekeeper for 3 years. She was reliable, hardworking, and never caused any problems. But when I learned that she had been sleeping in my building's laundry room, I fired her immediately, without asking why. Julian took a deep breath. What I didn't know was that Maya had been homeless for 6 months because she gave up her apartment to pay for her mother's cancer treatment. She wasn't sleeping in the laundry room to cause trouble. She was sleeping there because she had nowhere else to go. The crowd of reporters was completely silent now, hanging on every word. After I fired her, Maya spent 3 days living on the street in the snow. This morning I found her unconscious on a park bench, nearly dead from hypothermia. If I had arrived even an hour later, she would have died. Julian's voice started to break with emotion. Maya Evans almost died because I was too selfish and heartless to show basic human compassion. She almost died because I treated her like she was invisible instead of like a human being with feelings and problems and a family who needed her." Several reporters had tears in their eyes as they listened to Julian's confession. "I can't change what I did," Julian continued, "but I can promise you this. I will spend the rest of my life making sure that no employee of mine ever faces what Maya faced, and I will personally ensure that Maya and her mother are taken care of for the rest of their lives." A reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Vance, what does that mean exactly? What are you going to do for Maya?" Julian looked directly into the camera. "Maya's medical bills are completely covered. When she's released from the hospital, she and her mother will be living in my guest penthouse for as long as they need. Maya will have her job back with a substantial raise, and her mother will receive the best cancer treatment money can buy." Another reporter spoke up. "But Mr. Vance, why should people believe you've really changed? How do we know this isn't just damage control?" Julian thought about the question seriously. "You're right to be skeptical. I've spent my entire adult life caring more about money than about people. But seeing Maya nearly die because of my actions, it changed something fundamental in me. I realized that all the wealth in the world means nothing if you use it to hurt innocent people." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I'm announcing today that Vance Global will be creating a new employee welfare program. We'll be hiring a director whose job it is to make sure that no employee faces financial hardship alone. We'll provide emergency housing, medical assistance, and personal support for any worker who needs it." The reporter started shouting questions again, but Julian held up his hand. "There's one more thing I want to say. Maya Evans is the kindest, most hard-working person I've ever met. For 3 years, she took care of my home, while secretly struggling to take care of her dying mother. She never complained, never asked for help, never caused any problems. She's a hero, and I'm honored that she's giving me a chance to make things right." As Julian walked away from the reporters, Sarah caught up with him, looking amazed. "Sir, I have to say, that was either the best PR move you've ever made or the most expensive mistake of your career." Julian smiled sadly. "Sarah, for the first time in my life, I don't care about the money. I only care about doing the right thing." Over the next week, Julian spent every day at the hospital with Maya. He brought her books, flowers, and her favorite foods. More importantly, he brought her mother, Eleanor, to the hospital every day so they could spend time together. When Julian first met Eleanor Evans, he was shocked by how thin and weak she looked. The cancer had taken a terrible toll on her body, but her eyes were bright and full of love when she looked at her daughter. "Mr. Vance," Eleanor said in accented English, "Maya has told me what you're doing for us. I don't know how to thank you." "Mrs. Evans," Julian replied, "I'm the one who should be thanking you. You raised an amazing daughter. Maya is the most selfless person I've ever met." Eleanor smiled. "She gets that from her father. He died when Maya was 16, and since then, she has been taking care of me instead of living her own life. I have felt so guilty about the burden I've placed on her." Julian felt his heart ache for this family that had suffered so much. "Mrs. Evans, Maya doesn't see you as a burden. She sees you as her purpose. Taking care of you gives her life meaning." During his daily visits, Julian began to see Maya as a real person for the first time. He learned that she had graduated from college with a degree in social work, but had taken the job as his housekeeper because it paid better than social work positions. He learned that she spoke 3 languages and had dreamed of working with immigrant families before her mother got sick. He also learned that Maya had an incredible sense of humor. Once she got comfortable around him, she started teasing him about his expensive clothes and fancy food preferences. "Mr. Vance," she said one day, as he brought her lunch from the hospital cafeteria, "you know this is the first time you've ever eaten cafeteria food, isn't it?" Julian laughed. How can you tell? Because you're holding that sandwich like it might explode, Maya giggled. It's just turkey and cheese, not a bomb. These moments of laughter meant more to Julian than any business deal he had ever made. For the first time in his adult life, he was connecting with another human being as an equal, not as a boss or a customer or a business partner. While Maya recovered, the story of her near-death experience and Julian's transformation went viral around the world. Social media was flooded with reactions. This billionaire finally learned what it means to be human. Maya Evans is a hero for forgiving him after what he did. Actions speak louder than words. Let's see if Julian Vance really changes. But the response wasn't all positive. Many people were angry that it had taken such an extreme situation for Julian to develop compassion for his employees. One act of kindness doesn't erase years of treating workers like garbage, one comment read. How many other employees has he hurt over the years? Asked another. Julian read every comment, every article, every post about the story. He knew that many people didn't believe his transformation was real, and he understood why. He had built a reputation over 15 years as a cold, ruthless businessman. It would take time and consistent actions to prove that he had really changed. But Julian was determined to prove it, not just to the public, but to himself and to Maya. After a week in the hospital, Maya was finally healthy enough to be discharged. Julian had spent the time preparing his guest wing for Maya and her mother, making sure it had everything they could possibly need. He had bought new furniture, medical equipment for Eleanor, and had hired a private nurse to help with Eleanor's care. He had also arranged for Eleanor to begin treatment with the best oncologist in the city. When Maya saw the beautiful apartment that Julian had prepared for them, she started crying. Mr. Vance, this is too much. We can't accept all of this. Maya, Julian said gently, after everything you've been through, this is the least you deserve. Please let me do this for you and your mother. Eleanor walked slowly through the apartment, touching the soft furniture and looking out the windows at the city view. Mija, she said to Maya in Spanish, this man has a good heart. We should accept his kindness. That evening, as Maya and her mother settled into their new home, Julian knocked on their door. I have something for you, he said, holding out a beautifully wrapped box. Maya opened it carefully and gasped. Inside was the most beautiful winter coat she had ever seen, thick, warm, and perfectly sized for her. I never want you to be cold again, Julian said simply. Maya hugged the coat to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. The next Monday, Maya returned to work at Vance Global, but not as a housekeeper. Julian had created a new position just for her, Director of Employee Welfare. Your job, Julian explained as he showed Maya to her new office, is to make sure that what happened to you never happens to anyone else. You'll work directly with employees who are facing personal or financial difficulties, and you'll have a budget to provide whatever help they need. Maya's office was beautiful, with windows overlooking the city, and a desk that was nicer than any furniture she had ever owned. But what made her happiest was the purpose of her new role. Mr. Vance, she said, I can't believe you're trusting me with something this important. Maya, Julian replied, you're the only person I trust with something this important. You understand what it's like to struggle, and you have the biggest heart of anyone I know. On Maya's first day, 3 employees came to her office seeking help. One was a single mother who couldn't afford daycare for her sick child. Another was a man whose father needed expensive surgery. The third was a young woman who was being evicted from her apartment. By the end of the day, Maya had arranged daycare assistance for the mother, medical coverage for the man's father, and emergency housing for the young woman facing eviction. This is the best day of work I've ever had, Maya told Julian that evening. I actually help people instead of just cleaning up after them. Julian smiled. You've been helping people your whole life, Maya. Now you finally have the resources to help them properly." 3 months later, Vance Global held its annual charity gala. In previous years, the event had been about Julian showing off his wealth and making business connections. But this year, he had a different purpose. Maya had been nervous about attending such a fancy event, but Julian had insisted that she be there as his guest of honor. "Maya," he had said, "this gala is supposed to be about helping people in need. You're the person who taught me what that really means." When the time came for Julian's speech, he stood at the podium, looking out at a room full of wealthy business people, celebrities, and politicians. "Good evening," he began. "Thank you all for being here tonight. In the past, I've used this event to talk about business achievements and financial successes. But tonight, I want to talk about a different kind of success. The success of becoming a better human being." The room grew quiet as Julian continued. 3 months ago, I was a billionaire who thought that money and power were the most important things in life. I treated my employees like numbers on a spreadsheet instead of like human beings with families and dreams and struggles." Julian looked directly at Maya, who was sitting at a table near the front, wearing a beautiful dress that Julian had bought for her. "That changed when I met someone who taught me what real strength and kindness look like. Maya Evans was my housekeeper for 3 years, and in all that time, I never once asked her how she was doing or if she needed help. While I was focused on making more money, Maya was sacrificing everything to take care of her dying mother." The audience was completely silent, captivated by Julian's honest words. "When Maya became homeless, I fired her instead of helping her. When she nearly died from hypothermia, I realized that all my wealth meant nothing if I used it to hurt instead of heal." Julian's voice grew stronger as he spoke about the changes he had made to his company and his life. "Tonight, I want to announce that Vance Global is donating $50 million to create a foundation that will provide emergency assistance to working families facing crisis situations. And I want to introduce you to the person who will be running this foundation, Maya Evans." The audience erupted in applause as Maya stood up, tears streaming down her face. She had never imagined that her story of struggle and survival would lead to an opportunity to help thousands of other people. When Maya reached the podium, she looked out at the crowd of wealthy, powerful people and felt overwhelmed. But then she saw Julian's encouraging smile, and she found her voice. 3 months ago, I thought my life was over," Maya began. "I was homeless, my mother was dying, and I had lost the only job that allowed me to take care of her. I felt invisible, worthless, and completely alone." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "But I learned that sometimes our lowest moments can become our greatest opportunities. Mr. Vance didn't just save my life that day in the park. He taught me that people can change, that wealth can be used for good, and that everyone deserves to be seen and valued." Maya looked directly at Julian. "Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. Thank you for giving me a chance to turn my pain into purpose. And thank you for showing me that the most important thing we can do with our blessings is share them with others." As the audience gave Maya a standing ovation, Julian felt more proud than he had ever felt about any business achievement. Maya had transformed from a frightened woman sleeping in a laundry room to a confident leader who would help thousands of families. 1 year later, Julian stood in his office looking out at the city. But instead of thinking about profit margins and business deals, he was thinking about the letter he had just received from a single mother in Detroit. "Dear Mr. Vance and Ms. Evans," the letter read, "I wanted to thank you for the emergency assistance your foundation provided when my son needed surgery. Because of your help, my boy is healthy and I didn't lose my job. You saved our family, and we will never forget your kindness." It was one of thousands of similar letters that the foundation had received in its first year. Maya's program had helped over 10,000 families facing crisis situations, providing everything from medical assistance to emergency housing to job training. But the changes weren't just in the foundation. Vance Global had become known as one of the best companies to work for in the country. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high. Productivity had increased dramatically. And Julian had discovered that treating workers well was actually good for business. More importantly, Julian had discovered what it meant to have real relationships with people. Maya had become not just an employee, but a true friend. Her mother, Eleanor, had responded well to her cancer treatment and had become like a surrogate mother to Julian, cooking for him and teasing him about his workaholic tendencies. That evening, Julian knocked on Maya's apartment door to check on Eleanor, who had been feeling tired lately. "Come in, mijo," Eleanor called from her chair by the window. She had started calling Julian, my son, in Spanish, and it always made his heart warm. "How are you feeling today, Mrs. Evans?" Julian asked, sitting down beside her. "Better," Eleanor smiled. "The doctor says the cancer is responding well to treatment. I might have many more years to watch my daughter change the world." Julian looked over at Maya, who was working at her laptop, preparing for a presentation to Congress about expanding family assistance programs nationwide. "She's incredible," he said quietly. "See?" Eleanor agreed. "But you know what makes me most happy?" "What's that?" "You two found each other when you both needed it most. Maya needed someone to believe in her worth, and you needed someone to teach you how to use your blessings to bless others." Eleanor patted Julian's hand. "God has a plan for everyone, mijo. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things that could happen to us." As Julian sat with Eleanor and Maya that evening, watching Maya work passionately on her presentation while Eleanor told stories about Maya's childhood, he realized that Eleanor was right. Finding Maya dying in the snow had been the worst moment of his life. But it had also been the moment that saved his soul. Before Maya, he had been wealthy but empty, successful but alone, powerful but purposeless. Now he had a family, a mission, and a reason to use his wealth for something meaningful. Maya looked up from her laptop and smiled at him. "Julian, want to help me practice my presentation? I'm nervous about speaking to Congress tomorrow." "Of course," Julian said, settling in beside her. "But Maya, you know that Congress should be nervous about meeting you, not the other way around. You're going to change the world." Maya laughed. "We're going to change the world. This is a team effort." As Maya began practicing her speech about expanding assistance programs for working families, Julian realized that she was right. They were a team now, not boss and employee, but partners in making the world a better place. And it had all started with a billionaire learning to see his housekeeper as a human being, worthy of compassion, respect, and love. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the people we think we're supposed to take care of, but who end up taking care of us instead. Maya had taught Julian that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives you touch, the people you help, and the love you share. And that was a lesson worth more than all the money in the world. If this story inspired you, please like, share, and comment for more.